The Broncos have better tackles than y'all think. That's why in our position previews, we're going to be talking about it today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, orange and blue today, with a discussion about Mike McGlinchey and Garett Bolles. But let's start on the left side, because when we did the Quinn Minor show, the guard show, we're like, hey, pay that guy. You know what? Garett Bolles, you can get paid too. And if you've got Bo Nix out there making quick decisions, these tackles are going to look pretty good when it comes to pass protection.
Garett Bolles is in a contract year. There were times when I don't think everyone thought Garett Bolles would see the end of this contract that he signed late in the 2020 season, his breakout year, the COVID year, of course.
There were times when I didn't think he'd get to his end of his rookie deal.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are. This is Garett Bolles' 8th season with the Broncos.
Wow.
Think about that. Ryan Clady, a guy who was not Bolles' immediate predecessor. Of course, you had Russell Okung and then guys in the 2015 season in between. But Ryan Clady was 8 seasons and missed basically two of those to injury. One entire season in the 2013 season, missed all but 2 games. Garett, well, I mean, it's wild to think that he is a mainstay, but that's what he's become. He is the longest tenured Bronco currently on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's still kind of maligned, but last year was pretty good. Last year was, I thought, his best season since the COVID year.
Zach Strief, everybody.
Thank you. Yes.
Zach Strief. That's what it is.
We talked about Zach Strief in the last show and the work he's doing with the centers. But with Garett Bolles, very similar to Mike Munchak, who got Bolles to that high level in 2020.
Right.
Right coach, right time, right demeanor. Screaming doesn't work for Garett Bolles. Something Zach told me last month is that with Garett, you've got to earn his trust. When you do earn his trust, he's on board. He's on the same page. And look, evidence of being on the same page and the Broncos being comfortable with him here is, we've talked about the cap issues. We mentioned yesterday the cap issues meant they didn't bring Lloyd Cushenberry back. They let him go to Tennessee.
Right.
The Broncos could have saved $16 million on the salary cap this year if they had cut Garett Bolles. And they brought him back because they see the value. And because he meshes well with Zach Strief. And Zach Strief is the kind of coach that, like Mike Munchak, he teaches. He doesn't scream. He's the type of personality that gets the most out of Garett Bolles. It's a more educational and holistic environment, and that works well for Bolles.
Yes. And the care, I've often said it about Garett Bolles. Do you care about him?
Mm-hmm.
And yelling and screaming, while it may work for some, to Bolles, it just shows like, you don't like me.
Yeah.
And whatever, like that's what works. And at the end of the day, is it working? Yes. Yeah. It's working with Strief. What a great
It's
teacher,
working.
It's working.
Had to do the little Anakin thing there.
Of course. Strief on Garett Bolles, when you talked to him, he said, quote, you can't reinvent a wheel with a guy who has 5,000 reps in games, right? You have to be able to tweak, and you have to be able to find strengths and accentuate them and teach him how to stay out of weaknesses, because you're not going to change everything about him. So some of the stuff he does is a little different than the other guys, but that's because of his experiences, close quote. You mentioned holistic. That is so fantastic.
That approach right there is why Zach Strief already is one of the best offensive line coaches in football.
Yes.
Because he's coaching to the player's experience and to the player's gifts. And saying, how do I make the most of that? How do I maximize what I'm working with here and get this person, more than a player, person, to be all that they can be in this job.
Right.
I mean, that approach, it's like he was tailor-made to wring all that's left out of Garett Bolles. And I say all that's left. The end of the career, it's not imminent for Garett Bolles, but at the same time, he's 32 years old. He's in his 8th season. And it's a contract year. Does Garett Bolles have one more big score? That could be determined this year. You can't dismiss the possibility of an extension for Garett Bolles for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's 32 years old. He played all 17 games last year. Aside from that injury, that horrific leg injury that he had back in 2022, he's played at least 14 games every season. So, he's dependable. Best ability, availability, best ability, dependability. That's been Garett Bolles. Second of all, with Bolles, we don't talk about the thing anymore. You know what the thing is that we used to always talk about with Garett Bolles, right?
Yep, because people would just see the flag and go, holding number 72.
Yeah, I remember my Valentine's Day poem back in 2020. Roses are red, violets are blue, holding offense, number 72.
It was the thing.
He cut that down the following year. And, of course, we looked at that and like, okay, is that a function of COVID, small crowds and all that? Well, last year, 17 games. You know how many holding penalties he had? 4.
I was going to say 3.
Yeah. That's it. That's good.
Yeah.
There are things that you used to worry about with Garett Bolles that you do not worry about anymore with him.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, that being said, he had 2 holding penalties in the last couple of games. So, didn't go into the off season there, but I would also say this. What were you dealing with in those last 2 games? New quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think the change from Russell Wilson really affected him in that moment.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, big difference in a lot of ways. And how the thing with Bolles, like we all remember how at the combine in 2017 he said that he protects his quarterback like he protects his wife, right? There's all it's if you saw The Blindside, it's like you're gonna talk about protective instinct, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that protective instinct means when the quarterback gets benched, I think it affected him more than it did anyone else. When Russell Wilson got taken out of the lineup, I think it affected Garett Bolles more than anybody else on that roster, other than Russell Wilson, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, explains why you saw the holding penalties tick back up there at the end. I think when you get Garett Bolles out there this year after a full off season to adjust and get in the right mind frame, he'll be back to where he was for most of the last year, which was a pretty good left tackle.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. You get Bo Nix out there getting rid of the ball faster because Stidham holds on to the ball too long. He did last year until I see him in a game not doing that. That's the last memories we have of Jarrett Stidham in a game is him holding on to the ball too long. The last memories we have of Mike McGlinchey. People think, oh, it was so bad. Okay, well, one, he's a mauler. He's a road grader whose pass protection is not his forte. It never was.
Mm-hmm.
When you're that size, it's difficult when you're reaching and trying to get to guys to stop them from your quarterback. But then you saw the final game and you're like, it can get worse, much, much worse without Mike McGlinchey. So, better enjoy what you've got while you've got it.
There were a few apologies I think they should have been written to Mike McGlinchey after that game.
Yes.
To say that was rough was an understatement. It was brutal. And honestly, and you mentioned it, combined with the tendency of Jarrett Stidham to hold on the ball for too long, it was a prescription for disaster. So start there, whether it's Bo Nix or Jarrett Stidham. I'd like to see Mike McGlinchey working with with new quarterback, see how it goes. Another thing also, and of course, you can't talk about Mike McGlinchey, unfortunately, without talking about the false starts. And he had 7 of them. And it went through my mind when he had a false start in minicamp.
Yes, right.
Like, oh, man, come on, Mike.
But he knows he's trying to beat the guy on the edge because his pass protection, it's not what he does. But if they're going to run the ball, go back to our running back preview, right?
Yeah.
If they're going to run the ball, that's great for McGlinchey. You got a young quarterback. You are going to have an emphasis on the ground game.
Yeah, the other thing also with pass protection and kind of getting your arms out there, sometimes you can be too tall and have too much reach. And that's Mike McGlinchey's, the extent of his frame sometimes works against him in pass pro.
Oh, yes.
Huge wingspan. And this is a giant man.
We talk to him regularly.
Yes.
He's huge.
It's for me especially, and I've had some good conversations with Mike. It's definitely how's the weather up there?
No doubt.
Yeah, but he is a guy that you root for on a human level. I'll say it with both Garett Bolles and Mike McGlinchey. These are 2 starters that as people I root for.
Good dudes.
They're good. They're very good. They're very good individuals. McGlinchey is as good a leader in that locker room as you're going to find. And, of course, right now, stepping into a new era, the Broncos need leadership more than ever. And it's part of the equation with Mike McGlinchey. Even when you have a season last year where he'll tell you it wasn't his best. He knows that he could do better. And he was very candid talking about his shortcomings with us last year. That he feels like this year's going to be better. I think Zach Strief talking with him, he feels like this season's going to be better for Mike McGlinchey, year 2 in his scheme. And I think Sean Payton feels the same way.
Right. Payton talked about it. Here's the coach.
Yeah, so a lot to that question. There were a number of things that he brought in a positive way. There's certain strengths he has, just like all these players. There's things we want to work on in the offseason. It's very important to him. He comes from a winning program. And I think that, going into year 2, you're going to see his continued development. There's a toughness to him and how he plays. But I'm glad we have him.
Toughness to him.
And also, one of the things where you always say focus on what they say, not what they do. What did they do with McGlinchey's contract? They restructured it to get a little more space right now, which effectively ties him to the Broncos for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, but barring injury, get used to Mike McGlinchey as your right tackle.
Right.
Because the Broncos don't get any kind of cap savings by moving on from him until 2026. And even then, the dead money from the contract is nearly twice what the cap savings would be. That's kind of a pretty easy calculus to have when you look at contracts. If the dead money is twice what is more than the savings, and certainly when it's nearly twice as much as the savings, then that player's not going anywhere.
Yep.
Right. So basically get used to McGlinchey as your right tackle for the next 3 years.
And the Broncos don't do that if they don't believe in him.
Right. They believe in him. There's a big belief that Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers, who both had moments that you could say last year were pretty ragged, right? They did some good things. And certainly when Sean Payton's talking about the totality of what Mike McGlinchey brings, he's talking about the leadership as well, because that was incredibly helpful in that room. But yeah, they believe Ben Powers, Mike McGlinchey, year 2 in the scheme is going to be better than year 1. I think they're going to be right. Now, I don't know if Mike McGlinchey is ever going to be like an all-pro, and I think that's another part of the thing with McGlinchey is people are looking at, oh, this contract, $87.5 million over 5 years, and now it's actually 6 years because they created that voidable year to get a little extra breathing room there at the end. So 2028 is the voidable $2.775 million, but they're okay with these guys being around. They also understand the value of consistency. They obviously had to make the change at center. Talked about that cap wise, but it wouldn't at all surprise me if one of the moves that comes out of this season. We talked on the last show about Quinn Miners being re-signed. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Garrett Bolles is re-signed as well. And that this
matches the length of McGlinchey in terms
Yeah.
of you got 3 years with McGlinchey, get 3 more years with Bolles.
Yeah.
There's something that can mess that up though, and not with Bolles' play. What do they think of the development of Frank Crum as we kind of wrap up today's program about tackles?
Okay,
I don't think Crum can develop enough so you go, he's our starter. But also, and there's another thing too, your record.
Yeah.
Are you a top 5 pick? You're not taking another quarterback, okay? Everyone has their own opinions, but I personally believe that's really, really dumb when people say they're going to take a quarterback in the top 5 next year. They would take a tackle in the top 5. So there's a couple things working against Bolles that Bolles really doesn't have any control over.
Or an edge.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so in terms of roster building, an interesting spot here because you may be making if you have that top 5 pick, you may be making contract decisions based on what you like more there. If you like the edges in the draft more than the tackles, then maybe your move is you're letting Baron Browning walk, you're maybe letting Jonathan Cooper walk as well. If you and then you draft edges. But if you say we're going to draft a tackle, then it's re-sign Baron Browning, let Garrett Bolles walk. That's part of it as well in this equation. But to go through the rest of the tackles here, they brought in Matt Pert, former New York Giant, a guy you and I are both high on back in 2020 in the draft process coming out of UConn. Another guy who's length. They have a type here they like. Okay, Frank Crum you mentioned is 6'7", 315. Alex Palczewski, who they brought in last year, and he spent the year on injured reserve, the rookie last year out of Illinois. 6'6", 314 pounds. They like length. They like wingspan here. They have a type.
Yep.
Frank Crum fits that type. Now, most likely, Frank Crum, practice squad.
Sure.
But there was also something interesting that was discussed by special teams coordinator Ben Kotwika about the types of players that will factor more on special teams because of the new kickoff rules. And he didn't dismiss the idea of offensive linemen being on kickoffs now because you've got the short area. You got the short area where everyone's lined up. So collisions are going to be kind of closer in. So if you've got athletic long tackles as backups, do these guys potentially factor in as players that you want up front on kickoff return helping protect? So for Palczewski, for Frank Crum, is this a path to sticking on the roster? Now, I know with Pert, they like the idea of having at least one guy on the bench in the rotation who started before as an insurance policy. But if Palczewski and Frank Crum, among others, show that they've got some ability, and don't forget Demontre Jacobs, a guy coming off of who's on the practice squad last year as well. Another guy, 6'6". I mean, yeah. Garrett Bolles, by the way, is their shortest tackle. He's 6'5".
Right.
But they love these tall, long tackles.
Mm-hmm.
You can't coach that.
Can't coach it. Yep. Well, we'll see what the future of the tackle position looks like. I'm a fan of keeping Bolles and McGlinchey together as long as you can.
You don't have to worry about it. Maybe Garrett Bolles isn't an all-pro, but he's pretty good.
Yep.
Like that's
Yep.
it's one less thing, right?
Yes. At bookend tackles, we haven't been
Yep.
able to talk about that around here.
In a long time.
Ryan and Ryan, right? That was it.
Yeah.
Ryan Harris, Ryan Clady. Okay, make it happen. What else can they make happen? Helping us out on YouTube, Mace.
First of all, I have to say, maybe not Ryan Clady and Orlando Franklin were good bookends too.
They were.
I want to give them. I'd say that's the last time you were talking about that before now.
Yes.
But
and
anyway,
then they moved Orlando to guard for whatever reason.
Still, the original sin of the right tackle revolving door was moving Orlando Franklin. You had stability and you junked it for
no reason
unknown. Anyway, how can you help us? Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss a
vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.
We got to talk about the horses because you want to talk about athletes that perform. I remember getting an argument on sports radio one time about a guy who's like, horses aren't athletes. I'm like, you got to be out of your mind if you think that. So you have the world's best trained horses, the world's best cowboys, the world's best stock. Like, this is a combination where it all comes together to make a great event.
It does. So Stay Smith Pro Rodeo, our stock contractor, 11-time contractor of the year, brings in the best horses and best bulls they have. And these horses, you know, they are born to buck. I mean, you hear that a lot, but they are. These are jobs to these animals. They know what they're doing. You know, they're bred for this.
They compete. They like bucking you off.
They do. I mean, you can see them. You can see them in the back alleys, and they're calm and just kind of relaxed. And when they get loaded, you can see them. They start to get amped up, worked up. They know what's coming, and they're ready to go. And you'll see them. You know, you'll see them guys get bucked off sometimes. You'll see those horses, those bulls, kind of take a victory lap with their head held high because they know what they did, and you know they're proud of the job they do.